Okay, this is part 5 of the video Jewish Racists in the Federal Court. A few students in my classes progressively generate incivility as the time passes from February to April 1999. I am asked by a number of students if I am Jewish. I respond I am not, and ask the students if they asked to add another reason to dislike me. Some smile and laugh. What does not dawn on me is the student's purpose is not benign. It is to find out if the principal and assistant principal will assist me in obtaining classroom water. When I ask my fellow Jewish and black social studies teachers, how does the Jewish AP deal with the disruptive students or students whose vocabulary includes expletives, they tell me Gorin Farron McCarthy immediately talks to the students, and if that doesn't work, she removes the students from the class and holds the students in the social studies office until a parent or guardian comes down to get the kid. Now, I'm not just saying this. I've got deposition testimony from Jewish teacher Robin Kovat, where she relates how a student made an obscene gesture to her in class, and she sent the student to the social studies office, where after Kovat's class, the Jewish AP listened to the student, listened as the student was told by Kovat to apologize or be kicked out of the class, and Gorin Farron McCarthy supported Kovat in her demands and threat. That, folks, is an example of disparate treatment against me. It's called evidence of discrimination. March 1999 rolls around, and the Jewish principal and assistant principal observe my class. They say the class is not engaged, too teacher-dominated, too many people absent. To make the lesson even more interesting, the principal in the back entrance of the room keeps answering knocks on the door, walks out at least 3 to 5 times, and is gone 20 to 50% of the time. It's real disruptive. I notice it. My kids notice it. And it's not just me. I get a sworn affidavit from 2 students to back me up. Plus I collected student statements for extra credit and had the students write down how many times the principal left the room and how much time she was out of the class. As an aside, students risked life and limb at Sheepshead Bay High School. I recall one time a group of black students was hunting a white male student from Russia in the halls. The Russian immigrant was running back and forth, standing in different doorways of closed classrooms in the windows to avoid being beaten up, killed. A year or 2 before I got there, supposedly a student was actually shot and killed in a classroom. Continuing. In the post-observation conference, when challenged as to what I have done to improve attendance, I related how I regularly filled out attendance forms and questioned the function of the attendance office and staff if they didn't contact parents if they had no other duties. Later in the semester, while in the social studies office, the Jewish AP tells me it's my fault the students are absent. I relate to her a time when I was a student teaching at a New York City public school, middle school, the year prior, and how I walked into a student bathroom with a fellow teacher, and I opened a bathroom stall and found for me a dump someone had taken on the toilet seat. I asked Gorin Farron McCarthy if a teacher in the school was responsible for that particular student's actions, and how could the teacher have convinced the student to behave like a civilized human being. The Jewish AP just got up and walked back to her office with the glass wall. Very shortly after my first unsatisfactory lesson, I walked into the entrance of the social studies office and overhear the Jewish assistant principal talking to the uncertified Jewish teachers Goldring and Kovat. And she advises them in her glass booth with a space between the glass ceiling, between the glass wall and the ceiling, to get their teacher certifications before I bump them from the school because I'm certified. I hear this, connect the dots with my unsatisfactory lesson rating, and wrongly conclude I'm being discriminated against because I'm male. I immediately file a complaint of discrimination or harassment based on gender with this school. Soon, For teaching all my students, I am handed a pre-formatted package of lesson plans that I am not permitted to deviate from. I work from the lessons provided when teaching. I get a marginally unsatisfactory rating. I get a marginally satisfactory rating, which is a satisfactory rating since in the collective bargaining agreement there's either satisfactory or unsatisfactory. I find it amazing that my performance is somehow subpar when I am working with 3 teachers who were bartenders prior to teaching social studies and 2 who worked at concession stands of the Mets games. The topic of conversation among these teachers in the social studies office of the white teachers mainly runs from the movies that were out at that time, Shakespeare in Love and the Austin Powers movie, to the latest recipe they have tried to cook. The black teachers were not of such dismal intellect as this motley crew of whites, as one of the black guys had been a nurse in the New York City hospital for a number of years, and the other black guy was a New York City police officer. Now, in April 1999, I have students in my class announce to other students that they have made complaints about me to Principal Friedman, and that Principal Friedman is collecting written complaints to fire me. I do not see any of these complaints against me until over 2 years after I am fired. None of these complaints are used to fire me the first time. I get a memo from the Jewish assistant principal, to see if I can make progress on getting back to Clara Barton High School. When there are no apparent upcoming vacancies at Barton, the principal writes she can get me transferred to one of the worst high schools in New York City, Seward Park. I reject the suggestion. To take such an offer would merely mean I would be fired from another school with a worse atmosphere. While in the social studies office, a female student, Jewish pierced goth girl 2, who is friends with while in the social studies office, a female student, Jewish pierced goth girl 2, who is friends with Jewish pierced girl goth 1, a few times a week comes in to berate me in the presence of other teachers. I asked the Jewish assistant principal to give me permission to have the Jewish pierced goth girl 2 leave the social studies office. The Jewish assistant principal denies my request and says the Jewish pierced goth girl 2 has just as much right to be in the social studies office as I do. Finally, the hatchet man from Brooklyn High School superintendent's office is called in to justify firing me. Now, the Brooklyn High School superintendent at the time was a black female. Her name is Joyce Coppin. She was the New York City Board of Education employee liaison between the Board of Ed and the Ocean Hill-Brownsville black community leaders during the Occupy Ocean Hill-Brownsville period. Coppin eventually moved to the executive assistant position of the previously occupied district, then the deputy assistant, and then until 1979 the superintendent of that district, Ocean Hill-Brownsville, before taking over eventually at Brooklyn High Schools. Well, anyway, during the Occupy Ocean Hill-Brownsville time period, the Afro-American Teachers Association was on the nightly news and was heard yelling vehement anti-Jewish and anti-white expletives on the streets and in the meetings held at the Bethany Baptist Church. These things were broadcast on TV, folks, okay? A few short years later, on October 15th, 1974, Joyce Coppin, on behalf of the Ocean Hill-Brownsville School District where she was working, sent letters to various blacks across the United States to celebrate Black Solidarity Day at the Bethany Baptist Church, site of the vicious anti-Jewish and anti-white hatred. Now, never one to miss an opportunity to ethnically cleanse the Brooklyn high schools of a white teacher, Joyce Coppin sent on her behalf Mel Farberman to observe my class. Farberman is, of course, Jewish. I get an unsatisfactory rating, no surprise. It's in part alleged that I had a condescending attitude, that I had a high absent rate, and because they split one of the lessons from the prepackaged lesson plans. Now previously I'd been told by Gordon Farron McCartney, who wrote the lesson plans a few years prior, that the prepackaged lessons were for summer school, which had longer periods, and that the lessons could be split. In fact, I collected the notebooks of my niece, who was in the public schools at that time, high schools. She was at the Borough High School, which is a much better school than Sheepshead Bay High School. And she happened to be taught from the same pre-packaged lessons that I was teaching from. And her tenured teacher coincidentally split the lessons over 2 days. I mean, I've got her notebooks. It's clear that they were split. Now, evidently, my niece's tenured teacher was never told if he split the lessons, he would be fired. Yet, for some reason, it was grounds to fire me. Now, eventually, a few days later, I assume, can't remember offhand, I get a letter indicating I would be fired. And within the minutes of that, I walk up to the social studies office and I see the Jewish teacher, Kovat, the Jewish now math teacher, soon to be head of the law program. She walks into the social studies to a round of applause from the mainly Jewish social studies teachers. They congratulate her on coming back in the fall semester to teach again in the social studies office. Now, note that Robin Kovat was still an uncertified social studies teacher. Now, in June, Joyce Compton signs the official form firing me, a decision which bars me from being a high school teacher in other New York City public schools, and in reality it also precludes me from getting a full-time as a middle school teacher in the other New York City public schools. Now, I challenge my firing. The 3 charges are: 1, I am an incompetent teacher; 2, my classes have a high absence rate; and 3, I turned in my grades 1 day late. I happened to be very sick that day. I was sick and exhausted from the abuse and harassment I had been taking, and I had to take that day off. Anyway, you turn in the grades, and it's not till a week or 2 later, because they got to wait for the grades were turned in before the Regents exams. So it's not like it affected anybody's grade. The Regents exams were graded after that. All right. So anyway.